Hey, everybody. Hey, so great to see you. Hey, it's awesome to see you. We have an epic, a legendary, an absolutely phenomenal show for you tonight. How do I know? Well, I just have a feeling inside. It's just one of those gut feelings that I get every now and then as a producer. When you just know you got a winning combination, you just feel it. You just know it. It's going to be one of those shows, guys. So, hey, great to see you. So, before we get into everything, I want to say hi to everybody out there. We will skip the normal pleasantries. There's just too many people in the chat today, but everybody, I see you. I appreciate you. We got an action-packed show, a lot of stories tonight, so we want to get right to it. But before we do that, I just want to remind everybody of a couple things. One, we had an intense premiere last night. We premiered the Mike Lorenzo at Untermeyer Park video, which was almost 2 hours long. It's getting rave reviews. Of course, Mike Lorenzo is the legendary detective from Yonkers Police Department, whose father was also a detective in the Yonkers Police Department and who was responsible for investigating the Berkowitz crimes up in Wicker Street, Warburton Avenue, Pine Street, and all that kind of stuff. So an extremely unique perspective, very interesting person. And I call him a philosopher in addition to a friend. So you might want to check out that video tonight. All right. Well, listen, guys, stories within stories. When I first started this video series in March 2021, well, you guys know who were with me this whole time. You know that I was just walking those streets looking for the stories of the ultimate evil, trying to show you guys the sights and the sounds of the ultimate evil. And well, it kind of morphed over time into, well, an investigation. Never thought that we would be investigating, never dreamed in a million years that we would be uncovering new facts. And I never thought that day in March of 2021, when I first started, that I would meet such interesting people as I have. And of course, some of the most interesting people that I have met in this video series have been the law enforcement people. And we're talking about active, we're talking about retired. And what's most interesting about the particular law enforcement people that I met was that they also were, ironically enough, many of them were either friends with Berkowitz, acquainted through friends to Berkowitz, or knew of Berkowitz, were Berkowitz adjacent, part of the whole milieu. And so we have found quite a few of these people. And of course, John Comparetto was the first one to come on board. Then we met Jim Fay. And tonight, you guys are going to be introduced to a very special new former law enforcement, John R. If he chooses to give his full name, he'll do that on his own. So we're very excited to have him come on today. He's going to fill in a lot of blanks for us, a lot of stories. His voice is extremely important to add to the historical record. But before we get to him, I just want to introduce the man who is going to introduce him. And you all know this guy and you all love him. We're not going to give him the big production intro, because I have a feeling that he's just too humble a guy to enjoy that. So we'll just say hello to the great Jim Fay. Jim, how are you, sir?
Good evening, everybody. How
So
are
of
you,
course,
Manny?
I'm doing great, Jim. It's awesome to see you. Awesome to be back on these Manny Mondays. And of course, this was one that we were going to do before my little unfortunate breakdown. And I'm so happy that we're back and we're doing this one, because again, it's all about stories within stories, and it's all about filling in these historical blanks. And we're just never going to get these anywhere else. So it's such an honor for me. So Jim, why don't you tell the audience briefly about yourself, in case briefly, okay? Because I know that you cops can talk forever if I let it. Just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, especially vis-a-vis the Berkowitz story, and then why don't you bring in our friend John R for us?
Okay, will do. Well, as I said in my original video a while back, I was a dispatcher in the New York Fire Department for a number of years, from the years 69 to 77. And during that time, parts of the Bronx, not known for its fire duty, despite the fact that the rest of the borough was burning down, was experiencing unusual fire activity and nuisance fires, false alarms, car fires, rubbish fires. And we got wind of it as dispatchers, and we started following up on it. And to make a long story even longer, we researched some information coming back from the fire companies going to these fires in the middle of the night. And one license plate that kept coming up was registered to David Berkowitz. So one night, quite by accident, myself and two other fellows, one who you will meet very shortly, we were out in my car, and we heard that what appeared to be a false alarm being pulled in City Island. The companies were responding to it. We knew what the story was from our experience with the rubbish fires. We went up there. We saw the what was later described as the Berkowitz vehicle coming off of City Island. We followed them for a number of hours. One thing led to another. Information.
But you know what, Jim? Let's not get too detailed. Let's
Okay.
let the audience savor what is coming, and let's get into that when John.
Okay. So anyway, we went ahead with what we found, and eventually the fires stopped. But the fellow that I was with, one of the fellows I was with, was my good friend of 53 years, John Rinciari, who lifetime boy from the Fordham section of the Bronx, big Irish neighborhood. And despite his Italian background, is almost a professional bagpipe player, well known in the bagpipe circles. He was if one was to analyze the saying "public service is its own reward," John would be one of those people that you would see in the dictionary. He, as a young lad, he was one of the founding members of a fire department Explorer Post, an 88 engine in the Belmont section of the Bronx. He later became an auxiliary fireman in that company, which at the time was one of the top 10 busiest companies in the city. He also was an active member with the 5-2 Precinct Auxiliaries in the Bronx, auxiliary police. And at some point, after a number of years, he was appointed to the Yonkers Police in 1979. He worked in the busiest precincts in the Yonkers, and eventually was assigned to the ESU unit, where he was trained in heavy rescue and heavy armaments. And as time went on there, of course, we're all familiar with the World Trade Center. John went there and assisted, and resulting in a serious respiratory problem, which eventually forced him into retirement. So here we are now with John Ranciari to talk about those 53 years that I knew him, if he wants to. If you want to put him on there.
Hey, Jimmy, thank you.
There he is, and all around
Hold
nice
on,
guy.
I have to do a little grooming.
Very modest John Ranciari.
Okay, all right, we're good.
Hey, wait a second. You know, I need one of
We can
those.
roll.
I need one of those for my nose hair.
Here you go.
So, John, hey, it's great to see you.
Hey, what's up, Manny?
We're so happy that you're on our airwaves for the first time. Of course, I've been speaking to you for months and months now.
Yes.
You know, you guys all sort of came on board after the Netto revelations, after we discovered the Netto family. All of a sudden, I started getting interest from the law enforcement community because it was like you guys finally saw something that had made sense to you. So we all sort of bonded over that. And you know, I've been up to your house, John. You have a war room where you're putting together the Son of Sam. And you know, just as an aside to the audience, the other night, John and I were on the phone, and I know that this guy is serious as hell, because we were talking and someone tried to speak to him, and he's like, Manny and I are in a serious, detailed Son of Sam conversation right now.
Yeah,
I can't talk to you. So I knew right there that we were brothers in the case. So it's really, really great to see you. So John, you know, we know that you got a lot of stories. In fact, you and I, when we first met, we realized that you were a customer of the bagpipe shop that I used to work at. And I always remember that we would always have a rule in there, only one story per customer, because it was all firemen and cops. And we knew that if you started talking, you would never stop. But we want that tonight. But of course, we're going to keep it focused to the old school stories. So, John, real quick, you're a super interesting guy. We know that you have a lot of stories of the old days, some stories about Berkowitz, the car, the arson, Howard Weiss, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, some opinions on Son of Sam. But why don't you give the audience just a little overview of your career, especially vis-a-vis Yonkers and the Yonkers Police Department. But, start sort of at the beginning. I'm going to get up the visuals that we do have available for us,
Sure.
which, of course, are, this famous picture here. But before we get to that, we have this badass right here, this serious guy who, what year was this picture taken?
I'm going to say that was in the mid-90s.
Mid-90s?
Yeah.
So I was in my early 20s, and I definitely would not have wanted to meet you in this capacity, for sure.
Well, I looked a little bit different then, Manny.
But, the first thing I noticed, and please don't be offended at this, John, we're friends. I think I can say this. I have never seen anybody with such long legs and such a short torso before. This is unbelievable to me. Tell me how this affected you in your life.
Well, the first part of it is I think I had my pants hiked up pretty high. But aside from that, in those days, I was probably running 6 to 10 miles a day.
Uh-huh.
So I was in pretty good shape. Now I'm lucky I could walk around the block. But back then I was running. I was in the gym every day. So I was very fit. I think I had about a 31 each waist in that picture.
Oh wow, 31! Holy cow!
Yeah.
That's what I'm at right now, and I'm basically I just basically don't eat.
Well,
So,
I hate to see what it is now, but
wait, and what's up with this belt? What's going on with this belt? I've never seen.
Well, that was the old school belt that we wore, and so you had bullets. We still had revolvers, and those were called bullet loops, where you see the rounds on the.
I thought this was like a punk rock
and then on
belt.
the other side, I had 2 pouches that were called dump pouches, where you could load from the pouch.
So now this was in the mid-90s. You were in the Yonkers Police Department.
Before we had switched over to the Glock semi-automatic pistol.
Right. Now, could you choose to have a revolver even if they issued you 9mm?
Not on duty, no.
Not on duty.
Off duty, you could carry a revolver, but on duty, we made the switch over to the semi-automatic Glock pistol.
Right. And then, of course, here you are. You were in ESU, correct?
Correct. I spent most of my career was in ESU.
Now, of course, Lorenzo the other day in our video told us a story about now you're a little older than Mike Lorenzo, but he told us a story about how when he was about 19 or 20, a cop had gotten assaulted on Lake Avenue. And about a week later, you and the rest of the cops basically went up to Lorenzo and his friends and were like, "Get the F off the block." And they were like, "Yo, it wasn't us. And he'll never forget you coming out of the car with billy clubs and all that kind of stuff. But he said that he understood.
Well, in those days, if you heard a cop, then
yeah,
the press was on for a while until we found who did it.
Right. And of course, that whole area of Lake Avenue. Now, you're not from there; you're from the Bronx, but that whole area of Lake Avenue, we've kind of examined, and then we put off to the side once we realized that Maury might not have been correct, and he was bringing that into Son of Sam when he might not have. But still, Lake Avenue was an intense area. And you told me once that you were in a bar, and actually, you were a cop, and you got assaulted in a bar. Tell that story real quick.
Do you want to hear it? It's a pretty long story.
Abridge it.
Well, there was a blizzard, and myself and my old partner Bobby Maitre were stuck because we both lived up on the other side of the Tappan Zee Bridge, so we were staying over the precinct that night. And Bob was from that area, and he asked me if I wanted to go to this new bar that had just reopened anyway, new ownership. And I said, I'm not going down there. There's a fight in there every 5 minutes. And
now, this is the famous Emerald Isle.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
He said, no, they cleaned it up. Don't worry about it. Anyway, make a long story short, we trudged down, me, myself, Bob Matry, and another fella. And I'm sitting at the bar, and there's a guy sitting next to me. And he made some kind of anti-Semitic remark to me and picked my gloves up off the bar and hit me across the face with my own gloves. And this guy was very big. And after I looked at Matry and I laughed and said, I told you this was going to happen. I kind of wiped my face. And I turned to him and I clocked him. And he went down. And the bartenders obviously didn't see him hit me in the face of my gloves, but they saw see him hit me, but they saw me hit him. And they came run over and grabbed me and made sure he knew them. He said, no, this guy started to fight.
So not only does a cop get assaulted in a bar, but then the bartender comes up and gets in your face.
Right. The bouncers thought that I was the guy that was aggressively started this fighting. And luckily they knew Matry, because I probably would have had a double problem going on.
Right.
Do you go back there?
Your bouncers at that point.
Do you go back there much, John, to that bar?
No.
Matry, now Matry has been on our video series. We did a video last year with Lorenzo, and where we actually went into the Neto household and they interviewed Maria Neto, and I'm going to be putting that video back up at some point. But yeah, Matry's a great guy, and he's gives me a lot of counsel, and I'm sure he's watching now, so I want to give a big shout out to Matry. So yeah,
better guy than him, Manny.
Yeah, he's a really, really good guy. He was very, very impressed with the Neto work that we did, and one of the things that I was impressed with was that a former detective, in fact, would call a civilian and say, "Hey, good work." I mean, that showed to me a lot of. I was dealing with different type of mindset here, someone who I could work with, and
he's a very humble guy and very knowledgeable.
And all you guys I found are like that. And it's been really ever since all you guys came on board, the video series has just taken a step up in not only in information, but just overall credibility. Now,
I just got one quick question for John that I forget. Maybe I never knew at all. How did you take the Yonkers test among all the other tests we were taking, or was there somebody to put you on to it?
No, I did. But what happened was I had just moved from the Bronx when the Yonkers test came up. And if you remember, during that period of after 1975, when I was supposed to go on in the police academy in the NYPD right after the layoffs, there was an academy class, and the class was canceled.
Right, same thing with me.
Right. So it was basically a scramble trying to get a job, a civil service job somewhere. And I remember going to Washington, D.C. to take tests. I went everywhere I could take a police test, and then I got called for Yonkers, but what helped was that I had just moved to Yonkers, and they hired from the residence list. The residents had precedence list. So I came out number 12 on the original list.
What number?
12.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
And you became a Yonkers PD in 79.
Yeah, correct.
In 1979, my only connection to Yonkers, because I'm a Riverdale boy, but my dad would always take me up to really every weekend in the summertime. We would go up to Vark Street. There was a bakery called Cafe Puglia.
Oh yeah,
yeah, right there. And my dad loved that place, and I'll never forget the owner and him were good friends.
It was Park Hill Avenue.
Park Hill Avenue across the street from Julio's, another great place. That's a big time in my family. And the ices at Cafe Puglia, and I just always liked Yonkers. It was just something about those old streets and old buildings. And of course, I didn't know it in any way. I was 6 years old in 1979. But still, it was just something about those streets that kind of always drew me back. And, that's one of the reasons I think I ended up sort of obsessing over Son of Sam, was because it also took place up there as well.
The only thing that attracted me to Yonkers was Nathan's. It's the only reason we ever...
My first date was ever at Nathan's. Guess how old I was? I was 7 years old.
It was easy to find. You go up Central Park Avenue, you couldn't get lost.
Yeah. My dad took me, and her name was Michelle Bliss. I'll never forget. She was my little honey.
My first day being assigned to the 4th precinct, I didn't know how to get there.
The 4th precinct.
I was lost on my way to report for duty.
Now the 4th precinct is right up there by Sacred Heart.
Yeah,
right in the heart, in the thick of where we're talking about. So now, But so like me, you were a Bronx boy. You weren't a Yonkers boy, and of course, this is a famous picture which you sent us, and this has a couple people in here in it that are relevant to our story. Well, first of all, here's you right here, correct?
Yeah, that's me.
Right. Let's get a little bit close up. Okay, and then here's another fellow by the name of Ed Snedeker right here.
Correct.
Now, tell the audience a little bit about Ed Snedeker, and
Okay,
also, of
well,
course, bring in the man of the hour, David Berkowitz, into the discussion as well.
That's actually how I ended up becoming. I couldn't really call. David Berkowitz became known to me through Eddie Snedeker. Eddie Snedeker's father was a fireman on Webster Avenue and 48 Engine, which was the closest firehouse to the house where I grew up. And myself, and if you scroll up to the top of that truck, the fella standing next to me to my left, right there, Dennis O'Connell, we started hanging around that firehouse in the 3rd grade.
In the 3rd grade?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
That's how it started. Yep.
Yeah. And Eddie's father, Eddie Snedeker's father, they called him the motor pump operator of 48 Engine. He drove the truck. And he was a very nice man. He was very kind to the kids that hung out in the firehouse. And Eddie lived down the street from the firehouse and went to our grammar school and was also a fire buff. So we became good friends with Eddie. On June 27th, which is a date I'll never forget, 1965, myself, Dennis O'Connell, who has since passed away. He was a great friend of mine. And another friend of mine, Pat Sharkey, he's a retired detective sergeant. We were kids standing, 12-year-old kids at the firehouse, and a box came in.
We're having some issues with the. Yeah, I think we're back. We had some issues with the connection, but we're back, I think. So I'm sorry.
A firebox came in for Fordham Road and Valentine Avenue, and we ran up. The company responded. We ran up the hill, and there were manhole explosions that were going on at that time. And so the 3 of us went up to a rooftop on Valentine and Fordham Road to look down at the scene. And as we're standing there, Eddie Snedeker is standing near the side of his fire truck, and the manhole behind him explodes, and he goes down. And nobody saw him but us from the rooftop because the firemen were not near him. They were doing something else. And we started screaming from the top of the roof. And there was a battalion chief, I think it was Chief Riley in the 19th Battalion. We were calling him, and he looked up, and we said, Eddie's down. We were hanging over the roof pointing to Eddie's father. So they put Eddie's father in the back of the chief's car and rushed him to Fordham Hospital. So we stayed there for a while, and then we figured we'd stop by, go to Eddie's house, find out how his father was doing, because he only lived 2 blocks south of the firehouse, lived directly on Webster Avenue. And just south of 188th Street. So as we were passing the firehouse to go to his house, we heard the bells go off, and signal 4-5 came over the bells, which meant fireman was killed in the line of duty.
Oh, man.
So we walked into the firehouse, and the radio was on behind the desk. And then we heard the announcement coming over that fireman Edward F. Snedeker was killed in the line of duty.
And you were with his son at the time.
No, his son was home.
Oh, okay.
So myself, Dennis O'Connell, and Pat Sharkey.
Okay.
So we walked down to the firehouse. I'm sorry, to Eddie's apartment building, was 2 blocks south. And when we got there, the chief of the department's car was there, and the chaplain, the FDNY chaplain, was Father Jablonski. Their cars were parked in front of the house. We weren't about to go knock on his door. But shortly after getting there, Eddie came out. I guess his mom sent him out to dump the garbage. And, we hugged him, and it's very, we were very sad for the loss of a great guy who was his father, a guy that we really admired and looked up to. So,
and then, so this is obviously after that whole incident?
This was the same day where his father died. This was
the picture.
The picture.
Oh, that picture, yes.
That was
after. Yeah.
That was after. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Yeah. Yep.
and apparently, I guess if so, Eddie's the son of a deceased, of a slain fireman. I guess I'm not quite sure what the
Yeah,
term
his
is.
father was killed in the line of duty.
Killed in the line of duty. So I
Yep.
guess that makes him somewhat a little bit more like, I see this guy has his arm around him and everything.
Who was that
Is-
fireman, John? Do you know?
That was Fireman Joe Namoga. And Joe was assigned to the community relations division of the FDNY, who had organized these Explorer Scout posts around the city and
Mhm.
firehouses. And it was him, and I don't know if you remember the other guy, Manny Croquez. They were the two guys that were like the administrators of that program, and two really real nice guys that took interest in the kids.
Yeah,
And
he
was
really
taken
he
at
really
the
looks
old
like he
fire
cares
department
about him
in-
here.
What's that?
He really looks like he cares about him here.
He did, and he cared about all of us.
Now, who's this Popeye looking dude?
That's called the Beef.
Oh
That's
man,
the infamous Bobby the Beef.
he looks like it.
Yep. Yeah, no, he's a Bronx legend in himself.
He had
Now-
more
I
fight.
spoke to him on the phone. The funny thing is, most of these fellas, we've stayed friends all these years. So
Well, that's one of the things that I find so endearing about all you guys is that, like, because I
Yeah.
went out to dinner with y'all the other day, and it's like you all are friends still. I mean,
Yep.
I barely talk to anybody in my life, from
Yeah.
the past, and it just seems like that. I guess we could have a whole show on that. What is it? Is it just like that's the way you were brought up, or you bonded?
I think it was a
because-
neighborhood thing at that time. Kids in the Bronx that formed bonds. They would. I think it was different than kids today, man. If no one was your friend, they're your friend for life.
Right, you didn't have so many distractions. Now,
Yeah.
there's one other cat in this picture that I want to talk about a little bit more, and that's this person right here. This is Von Mueller,
Yeah.
and there are videos going around right now. We're not going to name names or try to call anyone out in particular, but there are videos going around right now that are saying that this guy here, they're calling him by name, a cultist in the Son of Sam cult, but who went by the moniker Eggs. And this cat here, apparently, according to Maury Terry, and in the book, was a friend of the Carr family, was friends with the Carr boys, was in the Carr house, was driven home to his parents' bakery on Burr Avenue in 1967, and was also happened to be best friends with David Berkowitz. Now, you have another story about that, correct?
Yeah. I find none of that to be true. I only knew Vaughn through this Fire Department Explorer program. He was a very meek, nice kid. I never heard anybody say a word bad about him, but recently I was able to contact through another friend of mine,
Mhm.
a retired New York City cop who hung out with Vaughn for a long time, and they were buffs and they knew each other very well.
And you just had this conversation very recently, right? Like in
I
light
had
of
this conversation last week. Actually.
right, because we've been trying to
Yeah.
figure out this guy Von Mueller. Now, I had a conversation with a gentleman. Let me just preface this with another friend of David Berkowitz by the name of Jeff H, who did not want to be further identified.
Yeah.
He was acquainted with Von Mueller, and he said, and he was the first person that told me that it was Von Mueller who was suspected of lighting arson fires around town, but that he was not in any way, shape, or form friends with Berkowitz. He never heard of him hanging out with Berkowitz. So then I came to you, and you were like, "Yeah, Von Mueller. I even have a picture of him."
Yeah.
And
I think we called him Von Mueller, if I'm not mistaken, but
right.
That's him in the picture, and he's since passed away.
So you were saying something about so you just had a conversation with his friend about
Yes.
about this.
And maybe you can get his friend on the show. I tried to contact him, and I left a message for him about this, and he adamantly said there was no way that Vaughn was friends with Berkowitz. There was also some reference that he might be an anti-Semite. He said absolutely not. He wasn't like that. And the other thing I asked him about was about the bakery shop on Pure Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, the best to his knowledge, his parents didn't have a bakery, and that his parents died when Vaughn was relatively pretty young. So
So there was
kind
no.
of in contrast to what people are saying about Vaughn. So
We do realize that that bakery was across the street and down a block from the first SOS shooting.
yes, yeah, absolutely.
Did you know that, Manny?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of like why this
Right.
bakery was brought into this in the first place. Now I
Yeah.
don't know why von Mueller was brought into this. All I know was that I
Right.
heard his name for the first time last year when I first started hanging out with the
Mhm.
people who had been in Maury Terry's inner circle. They had told me, yeah, this guy Von Mueller, he's eggs. He's eggs from the Ultimate Evil, and he's eggs because his last name was Mueller and Mueller egg noodles, and that's how we got
No.
the. And I just believed it, because
Yeah,
I had nothing.
And listen, I can't discount any of that, but
Right.
it doesn't sound to me, from knowing him, doesn't seem like he was that type of a character. And from talking to his good friend, who was very forthcoming, he pretty much shot down most of that. So
Right. And look,
yeah, but it doesn't make sense.
Here's the three of you in the same picture. I mean, you can't get more authentic than that, right?
Yeah.
Like Maury Terry was not in this fire brigade
Mhm.
in there with you, knowing you. Here's you,
Right.
here's Ed Snedeker, and of course Ed Snedeker was probably the closest to David Berkowitz. And we're gonna get into. Go ahead.
Yeah, let's get into that because I'll tell you how we actually met Berkowitz.
Okay.
So Eddie's father dies, right? And he had one sister that was a newlywed, and his mother died a few years, not too long after that.
Wow.
So Eddie essentially was an orphan.
So here's just a picture of Eddie real quick. And there's a video online of with an interview with Ed Snedeker.
Right.
Now, oh, hey, we have someone in who's just joined us. Let's bring him in. This is Son of Sam history right here. This is Son of Sam backstory history. We have it adding to the mix. The great one himself.
Here,
John Comparetto.
Hey.
Adding to the mix or adding to the confusion.
No, we're adding to the history. This is amazing.
Hey.
John,
Hello,
how are
John.
you? Thanks
How
for
are
showing
you?
up.
So I got to show you a gift that a friend gave me. Very interesting. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hold on. Don't go nowhere.
Okay. You and your O'Shaughnessy. Here we go.
Oh wow! That was the front page of the Daily News, right?
Yeah.
If you look right behind John R, right behind you, there's the same one.
That's
Friend
because
of mine
John's
had
still
it
looking for it.
blown up. He had it blown up on his wall. He's actually a chief in Jersey, and he's into this stuff. And he had it blown up on his wall, and he gave it to me.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Actually,
Awesome.
while you guys are talking, I'm gonna get something to show you guys because now I feel like left out. Just give me a second. Keep on talking real quick about
All right, Manny.
Snedeker. I'll be right back.
So now Eddie's mom dies, and Eddie now goes up to live with his sister, who was just married and had just gotten an apartment in Co-op City, which had just opened. So
Hold on, I'm sorry, John, real quick, because I have to top.
Go.
The original Pine Street sign taken about, I don't know, a year after the arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool.
The original.
They changed the rents. They changed the address of that building, didn't they? Eventually,
They did. I think it was originally 35 Pine Street.
Right.
They changed it to
42.
42. Yeah. Because people were going there taking people's doorknobs and all kinds of things off the building as souvenirs. So that they tried to change it. Thought maybe that would dissuade people, but I don't think it worked.
All right, so I'm sorry to interrupt you. So we were talking about how we met Berkowitz. Now, for everybody out there who doesn't know John Comparetto's another friend, member of this whole inner circle here, and was friends also with. John R was not friends with Berkowitz, but Comparetto was.
Correct.
Okay, so keep on telling the story about how you met Berkowitz.
So Eddie goes up to Co-op City, he moves up there with his sister, and he quickly, I guess he starts his fire buff, the Co-op City volunteer fire, with young kids that had a little fire buff club, and that's how John got involved. Also, I think with those fellows, and then Eddie came around to his father's firehouse, with a group of his new friends from Co-op City, and one of those kids was David Berkowitz.
Wow.
And
Now,
I remember
how old?
13, 14
13.
maybe, I'm guessing. Somewhere around there, young. And I had said to Eddie after sometime during the time when they met, there were maybe 4 or 5 kids with him. And of course, Eddie would walk into the firehouse, and the guys were very glad to see him. They worked with his dad, and I asked him about Berkowitz. I said, "This it's not that he seemed like a bad kid. He just seemed very socially awkward to me."
Now, at 13 years old.
Yeah.
And how old were you?
Same age.
Same age.
Mm-hmm.
And you were observing at 13. Now, was John? Now,
he just seemed to be like standoffish. He wasn't engaging with the rest of us as the other kids as they were. And I asked Eddie, like, what's the story with this kid? And Eddie got mad at me. And Eddie accused me of being judgmental. He goes, "No, he's a good kid," and
now,
so I remembered his name. I knew who he was. I would knew him by sight. And the next time he really came to, it was either when I met John for Comparetto years later. John was on the NYPD, and he was walking a foot post on Fordham Road and Webster Avenue. He was actually assigned to the 4-6 precinct. I lived on the border at that time. The borders of the precincts have since changed, but the 4-6 precinct and the 5-2 were divided by Fordham Road. I lived at Fordham in Decatur, and I had arranged to meet John Comparetto for his meal period on the corner of Decatur Avenue and Fordham. There was a Greek diner, and as I see John is in uniform, and I'm walking up to him, I hear somebody calling his name.
Now, hold on. What year was this now? So you
I'm
were
going
talking
to say
about
it was your 75 sometime, because
75.
before the layoffs.
74.
Nope, 75.
Yep.
75. Okay, so
before he got laid off, right, John?
Right.
Right.
So you met. All right. So I want just so clarity for the audience's sake. So you met Berkowitz when you were 13, and you felt
I saw him at different, fires or going up to see Eddie. I would see him here and there, but the times that stuck out in my memory was the time that he met. He came into the diner, and we heard him calling. He was calling John, and
John Comparetto.
When it was David Berkowitz walking up to us at Fordham and Decatur, and he came in, and we all sat down and had lunch called the Horizon Diner on Fordham Road and Decatur Avenue.
Now, hold on one second. So when you were 13, Rince,
yeah,
and you met all these cats in Co-op City, was Comparetto, were you part of that already yet? Were you part of that crew yet when Rince first met Berkowitz with Ed Snedeker, or you hadn't moved there yet?
I didn't meet them. I was 17 years old. When Rince met them, they were in their 13s, whatever. I didn't meet them till in Co-op City. I was probably a year older than Berkowitz. So I moved there in 1970. I was 17 going on 18. Mm-hmm. And I met Berkowitz then. So he had to be 16 years old at the time.
So Berkowitz, so when you met Berkowitz, Rince, it was a couple years before.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to get these timelines straight.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
Your younger kids.
But you didn't hang out with him like socially. You would just see him like in the early years, 13, 14, 15.
Didn't hang out with him, but I knew that Eddie really felt strongly about him. Like he was a good friend.
Right.
John, after his father died, did Snedeker ever go back to Ryewood 48 or hang out there at all?
He did hang out there, yeah.
For a number of years, or just until his mother died?
I don't think it was that long. I mean, I don't know what year Co-op City opened.
After he moved to Co-op City, did he ever come back to 48?
Well, he did, and that's the time when I met him with Berkowitz. He brought Berkowitz and some other fellas around to the firehouse on Webster, and I think we had arranged through phone conversation to meet them there. So myself and Dennis met them at 48 Engines quarters.
And did Berkowitz get heavily involved with all this auxiliary fire explorers? What was the deal with him?
Well, he wasn't in the explorers.
Okay.
But he later on, when myself, Jimmy, and John, we all ended up in the NYPD had an auxiliary rescue unit in the 5-2 precinct, and we joined that. And Berkowitz was in a similar unit, but he was in the 4-5 precinct.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried to transfer to the 5-2 where we were, and we were already thought there was something like a little bit not right with him. And,
Now hold on. Who's we? The three of you?
It was myself. I think it was Gary H. and someone else. There was somebody else involved, and the coordinator for us was a detective in the 5-2 precinct that asked us, so he wants to start with this kid. He put in a request from the 4-5, and we're like, I don't know if he's all,
Tell him who
Right.
the
stories. And I think by that time there were already stories going around about him as having problems.
Tell him who the coordinator was.
So the coordinator was Hank Spallone, who ended up the mayor of Yonkers. He retired from the NYPD. And he would come up to myself and Gary and say, "You guys saved me. Thank God." I didn't
I know this sounds nuts, but maybe that's why Berkowitz ended up living up in Yonkers and going maybe just out of revenge for Spallone. He's like, you know what? F that guy. He's from Yonkers.
I don't know that he would have known that.
Nah.
That
Right,
Hank had
right.
anything to do with him not coming there.
All right, and he became Yonkers mayor later on. So that's just craziness on my part. So Berkowitz does not get into this 52nd precinct auxiliary unit. And then what became of him? I mean, any one of you guys who knows, like what became of him at that point?
From conversations that we would have with John Comparetto, because we all became pretty good friends, and he would say, Berkowitz had problems when he was in the Army and service, and he was really acting strange, and seemed to be having some kind of psychological issues. And
so now let's get back to this meeting at the diner, because Comparetto did tell us the story once on a video that we just recently reposted. But since you're here, let's just get the story, told again, because these are little backstories. They fill in blanks. They talk about the relationship between you guys and Berkowitz. To me, it's all very, very interesting and intriguing, and just little pieces of the puzzle. So the Horizon Diner, what is it? So tell us that story, starting from the beginning. And Comparetto, please interject whenever you feel.
Well, so as I meet John, he's in uniform. We're walking toward the diner, and we hear some yelling, "John, John!" and look down toward Webster Avenue, and here's David Berkowitz approaching.
And I tried to turn around and avoid him.
Now, you tried to turn around and avoid him. Why?
I dropped him off in 1971 in Fort Dix when I thought he was, normal. And then, when he started writing us letters and taking every drug known to mankind, he burnt out his mind, and he had become a Bible thumper Jesus freak in plain English.
Right.
He couldn't have a conversation of anything but the Bible. And I had not seen him since the day I dropped him off in June of 71. Now, I had moved upstate to Rockland County. I had become a New York City cop. My friends who were still in Co-op City were telling me that you can't talk to him. You can see his eyes are glassy. You can see right through his eyes, and every word out of his mouth is a section from the Bible.
Well, that's actually what I was going to ask you, because the letters that we're finding, the new recently unearthed letters from his apartment, which are just insane, right? They're written very biblically, in the sense, like it's almost like he's a preacher and he was using "it is I, and I am the people of the world, and I, and this and that," and this very grandiose language. Was he speaking like that? Was he using
Yes, and it was also the letters I was getting from him, and they were sometimes 10 pages long, rambling. Instead of signing it Dave, he was signing it Master of Reliance. And that was kind of my last dealings. I moved away. I stopped sending him letters. We were not communicating anymore. So I had no communications with him now. Well, I'm going to say 72 probably. I dropped him off in 71. I guess he got burnt out because they sent him to Korea. And I had no communications in 72. And now all I know is that he is a Bible thumping burnout. and he's calling my name, walking across the street.
I know the feeling.
And I was, look, I'm getting laid off to the end of the month. I had enough drama in my life. I wasn't ready for this.
Yeah.
And we met him and we had lunch. And John, I thought he was very normal at lunchtime. What did you think?
I just kind of didn't have, he would speak to you because I think, I don't know if you remember this, but we were sitting at the counter. You were in the middle and I was to the left and Berkowitz was to the right. And him and I really didn't converse at all.
John, did you remember, like, this is the guy who I met at 13, who I thought was weird? Did you associate?
Oh, I knew who he was.
You
right
knew who he was.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I knew exactly. Yeah, I knew it was him. Yep.
So keep on going. So he's on the counter. He didn't talk. Where were you going?
Him and I didn't converse at all. I mean, I might have said, "How you doing, Dave? How you doing, Rince?" That would have been the end of it. And then when we walked out, he went his way. We all went out. John went back to walk his post, and I walked up the street to 193rd Street where I lived.
So, John, you were in uniform then. You were in uniform as a policeman.
Yes, and he gave me his new address. He told me he was living on Leidig Avenue, and he asked me to stop by after work, and I said, sure. And after work, I drove up to Leidig Avenue, and I went up to see him, and nice, clean, single-room apartment. He had a bed, a workbench. There was not a workbench, a weight bench with weights on it. Mm-hmm. He had a desk. On the desk was a police scanner, and he also had a book on his desk, studying to be a New York City police officer. And he said to me, he said, look, he said, I know you're getting laid off, but they're going to have to hire back, and eventually they're going to have to hire more people. And I think he told me that he was. I don't think he was in the post office yet. He told me he was going to take a job at the post office until he got called by the police department. And I wished him well, and that was the last time I talked to him until I got that phone call from Jim over there, waking me up at nighttime. One of my buddies got arrested. It was son of Sam got arrested. And I said, big deal. Why are you waking me up? He said, it's one of our friends. And I named all my other friends except him, because why would I name a Bible-thumping Jesus freak?
Right.
And unbeknownst to me, he became a devil worshiper. So,
yeah. I mean, so Rince, so then was that the last time that you ever interacted with Berkowitz?
No, I know there was somewhere, probably maybe before that, but I'm not sure. There was a wedding that I was at where him and I were sitting at the table. I think I sat next to him. Now,
is this the famous wedding of Ed Snedeker?
I believe so, yeah.
Where
no confusion on where this wedding was.
Yeah, where no one can quite
figure. A long time ago, and I'm not 100% sure.
Was Snedeker's wedding in the Bronx?
Sitting next to him at a wedding.
Was it in the Bronx?
I don't remember.
Well, I
originally thought it was in Maryland, but it was.
Here's the relevant passage. Here's the relevant passage from The Ultimate Evil.
Okay.
It would be established that Shane, and now that's Patrick O'Shaughnessy, we'll talk about him, right. Berkowitz and Weiss all attended the Maryland wedding of another friend shortly before the Son of Sam killings began. There were movies of the wedding reception. They were there. I'd learned from Queens District Attorney Herb Leifer. Shane, for his part, would acknowledge his friendship with Wheatcar and Weiss, but said he didn't work with Berkowitz in the auxiliary unit. Now that's O'Shaughnessy. So we'll talk about all this. So okay. This wedding,
mm-hmm.
Do you remember Patrick O'Shaughnessy there, Howard Weiss?
I don't think he was there, nor Howie Weiss, because I don't think there was any connection to them to Eddie Snedeker. I do not think they were at that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
So is it possible that Maury was talking about another Maryland wedding?
Well, I don't know. But he might have got all these facts and these people kind of overlap.
Right.
That may have been some confusion there, but.
Well, this is more beyond confusion to me, and I'm not expecting you to give me the answer here because I know you don't know, but this is very clear. I mean, this book clearly tells me that Patrick O'Shaughnessy was there with Howard Weiss and Berkowitz at a wedding in Maryland.
Well, I highly doubt that was the one that we're talking about, Snedeker's wedding, which turned out not to be in Maryland anyway. So, but see, the thing was that Eddie Snedeker was stationed in Maryland. And lived in Maryland, was married, and actually became a Baltimore cop.
Right.
So,
but I so far, John, where do you Comparetto? Where do you remember this wedding taking place?
Up here.
And so does And
Well,
so does Jeff H. He remembers
Yeah.
it too in the Bronx. Now,
And
Jim,
we spoke to Eddie's son, who talked to his mother,
Yeah.
who was up here. Now,
Yeah.
I got to bring up something that I just thought about. Maybe ties it in, maybe not, and maybe why it could have been a different wedding. Howie Weiss had some contacts in Maryland. Way back when I was in the rescue unit, I went with him to Chevy Chase, Maryland. We spent a weekend sleeping in the rescue. They had a state-of-the-art rescue unit, the fire department. We slept in their quarters and rode with them for an entire weekend in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I mean, I had never seen. I mean, the quarters looked like a mansion, if you ask me. It was really. They had the state-of-the-art equipment, state-of-the-art rigs, and everything. I wasn't really a fire buff, but I was. The rescue stuff was, just amazing to me.
right.
So I think Howie had some contacts down in the Maryland area. This wedding that people talk about may have been a Howie wedding where he took O'Shaughnessy,
Maybe.
but it wasn't Eddie's wedding. It wasn't Snedeker's wedding.
Well, how close was Berkowitz to Weiss? Because
I
according to this
don't
book,
think
they were like,
even. I don't think they were close at all because
No,
Howie Weiss, Berkowitz never made it to the 5-2 rescue, and Howie Weiss was in the 5-2 rescue. I don't think there was any close relationship with them at all. And
well,
but Weiss and O'Shaughnessy were friends.
here's what the book says.
Yeah.
And of course, all we can do is read the book and then find out, what you guys know from the actual reality being on the ground. It says Weiss, Berkowitz, and former Yonkers police officer, I will call Peter Shane, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, all belonged to Police Auxiliary Fire Rescue Unit in the Bronx in 1971 before Berkowitz joined the Army. So
Yeah, they weren't in the same unit, though. That's the thing, that O'Shaughnessy and Weiss were in the 5-2.
yes.
And Berkowitz was in the 4-5, and he never made it up to the 5-2. So that I don't think. Howie Weiss might have known who Berkowitz was because he was trying to transfer there,
right.
and Howie was a sergeant, or was he a sergeant in the unit or a
He
lieutenant?
was a lieutenant in the auxiliaries, and
Yeah.
Eddie was the captain. Yeah.
So he might have known who he was, but I don't think that there was like a friendship or anything between them, as to my knowledge.
So in
I
this
did know O'Shaughnessy that they were friends.
So in this interview alone, sorry, Jim, give me 1
All right.
second. We've established that the story of Von Mueller from The Ultimate Evil, Eggs, is most likely not true. There's clearly, from people who were actually there, there's clearly some controversy here as to these passages and the veracity and truthfulness of these passages that we're reading here about Weiss and Berkowitz. Were Weiss and O'Shaughnessy connected?
Yes, definitely.
They were much better connected, those two.
They were friends.
Now Weiss makes an appearance here in The Ultimate Evil. He's one of Berkowitz's friends who gets killed, and he has a .44 handgun. That's why Weiss makes an appearance in the Ultimate Evil. Can you tell the audience a little bit, fill in the blanks a little bit more on this Weiss character?
I think Jimmy would be better to fill that in because he had firsthand information about
Perfect.
that.
Whoever knows the most, this is the beautiful thing about having the three of you guys here with us at once, and I hope this isn't the last time.
Well, Howie, we were all fire buffs, and I actually got to know Howie from a long gone fire buff club called the 6-6 Club in Manhattan. He was like the secretary or something, and we met in Manhattan, and
the 6-6 Club. That's gonna just
Yeah,
open a whole can of worms.
Actually, the whole title of the club was the 6-6, the Association for Auxiliary Firemen - 6-6 Club Incorporated. And we, the first meeting I went to, and the last one they had there was at 44 Engine on the 77th Street. Then they moved over to the Red Cross. But I found out Howie lived around the corner from me. I lived in Parkchester. He lived on 30th Avenue. So I used to hitch a ride with him to go to the 6-6 Club meetings. And then, you'd see him at fires, and one thing led to another. And it was me, Eddie, if we used to get together, like I said, about the clandestine meetings and everything like that. And, I know him for years. But to say that Howie had a 44, I think he'd be bragging about it if he had one.
Really?
Yeah, I don't, he had his guns, but, he had permit for everything, but 44. I don't think.
I don't remember him having one. I do
No,
not.
I don't. Yeah, that's why I say when he died, when he was killed, we went to me and Eddie went to his apartment, and the
Now,
cop.
Eddie is Eddie Snedeker?
No,
No.
that was the Eddie you met at the dinner there.
Oh, okay.
The old timer.
Okay. Oh, Eddie Ratowski. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
got
he,
it.
the cop, everything was finished, and he never said to us, "What's with all the guns? How come you had all the guns?" Or the detectives say there's a lot of guns missing, or something like that. Nothing was mentioned about guns, except the weapon that was used in the homicide.
Jimmy, I
It was
do
never-
remember
that was
something
mentioned to
about
us.
that.
What was that, John?
I do remember something that when O'Shaughnessy left the PD,
Which
kind of,
PD?
abruptly,
Yonkers?
Yonkers
Yonkers
PD?
PD?
that he signed his guns over to Howie, and that O'Shaughnessy's guns were in his closet.
Mm.
All right, well,
I don't know if you remember that.
I don't. Well, I have no
And
knowledge.
I
of that
do
at all,
also believe that O'Shaughnessy might have had a 44. And I think that had something to do with why at one point he was being investigated, that just as being the owner of a 44.
He was I think he was investigated by NYPD, but
Yeah.
not particularly because they suspected him of SOS. I just think that this was during the period where they were trying to track down everybody with a 40,
Right, and I
with
think
a
that
44.
he might have had a 44. And maybe that's how that gun came to be in Howie's possession. Possible.
Possibly.
Did you ever hear how he never talked about it? Either one of you guys?
No,
did
but
you?
I think after his homicide, that it was disclosed that these guns that belonged to O'Shaughnessy were found to be in his closet.
That's so let's assume that that's true. Okay, for a
Right.
second. Then this shows that Maury was wrong in this book as well, because it's like Shane and Berkowitz and Weiss. Weiss also owned a 44. Shane owned a 44. Well, we're not getting the context that Weiss owned Shane's 44. It wasn't like they all had individually these guns.
Right.
From what you're saying, Weiss got Shane's 44.
That's what I believe.
O'Shaughnessy.
Yeah.
O'Shaughnessy's 44.
O'Shaughnessy's. Yep.
Right.
John
So
Comp, did Howie or any of those guys ever mention or refer to a 44 in the to you?
No, but I had one, and
I know you had one,
I
right?
had to make you laugh. So prior to Berkowitz being caught, NYPD was, researching everyone who had purchased one with federal dealers and everything. So I was working undercover narcotics at the time. I was a detective in Rockland County, and I got a letter from NYPD. It said, "Dear sir, our records indicate that you are the owner of a 44, a bulldog, charter armed bulldog. We would like you to bring it down for testing." And I basically sent them back a letter. "Please shove this letter up your ass because you'll leave me off. If you want it, you can send somebody up here to get it, but otherwise go to hell." And I never heard from them again. Shows you how efficient their investigation was.
right.
Again, you would think they'd say, "You know what? This guy could be a little crazy. Maybe we should go check him out."
Right.
Never heard from them again.
Never heard from them
I
again.
never heard of anybody else having one. No, that was not a common firearm. It was very uncommon. Okay.
Well, that's why I say Howie would have bragged about it if he actually owned one.
Yeah, and the reason I had bought one, I was always a gun guy. I mean, I'm a firearms instructor and everything else. But when I was working undercover, I often could not carry like a big gun, with a lot of rounds. And that little bulldog had a lot of stopping power. So when I saw it, when it became available, I bought it because it was easy to conceal and it had great stopping power. And then, of course, it became famous when Berkowitz began using it. But I didn't know anybody else who had one. I did not know anybody.
I think the total number that was sold around New York anyway was only double digits, like 80 of them or something like that.
There weren't a lot. There weren't a lot.
Weren't. I think it was expensive gun in its day, I think.
I don't remember.
I tell you, I don't really know much about guns, and I'm not like you guys. I'm actually scared to touch a gun, even though I'm a big Second Amendment guy. I love our Second Amendment. Never would think about anything like that. But the 44 is just a beautiful object. Just looking at it, maybe that makes me sound weird, but I just think it's a very pretty looking, very beautiful, muscular, nice looking gun. But that's just my own little taste. What's so special about the 44? Just that it could stop like an elephant? Like, what's the deal with the 44?
Well, don't mix up if you watched Clint Eastwood, Dirty Harry, he carried a 44 Magnum.
Okay.
The Bulldog was a 44 Special. Big difference. The Magnum puts out a bullet probably at 2,000 feet per second or just under that. The 44 Bulldog was probably putting out I like to call it a garbage can, like a miniature garbage can. It was putting out that bullet probably at only 900 feet per second. But imagine getting hit with a garbage can, and that's what that really was. You know, smaller bullets depend on expanding. Like you hear about hollow points and all these fancy bullets. A bullet depends upon expanding. The 44 Bulldog was just so big, it didn't have to expand. It was just a large round, very potent round. But then again, something that's very important. I don't care how potent the round is, it's shot placement. And that's why, thank God, many of the people that Berkowitz shot did live.
Right.
So it's still about shot placement also.
Right, exactly.
Rince, did you ever fire one in your training, 44 Bulldog?
Did I watch me?
Did you ever fire one in your...
I never did, no. No, I never did.
So this is just another passage from the Ultimate Evil, and you know, I like to show these because we have the book, and then of course we have the reality, which is you guys telling us the stories, you know, and we didn't have these conversations beforehand, the three of us, to try to get our stories straight. You're just talking right off the cuff, but here we got the Yonkers ex-cop Peter Shane, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, with a 44, and the dead Howard Weiss supposedly had one too. Well, now we know that they were probably the same one. One was given to the other. And we got both Weiss and Shane tied to Berkowitz, which you guys say is not really the case. Because,
I don't think so.
Yeah, who also had a 44. Now, right around the corner from Berkey, we got Johnson, suspected of committing crimes in just the right category, and he's got a 44 Bulldog too. Want to play those odds? No, Maury, I don't, because actually, maybe I do want to play them because you're wrong.
Yeah, you know, in a way, I could see how Maury could have all of these intersecting stories of people that knew this guy and the other one kind of could have got convoluted, and he put this stuff together in the wrong way. So I could see that possibly happening. I don't know whether,
but he didn't do it by accident. He probably did it on purpose to make a story.
It's possible. I guess we'll never really know. So I want to get back to so what happens after this meeting at the diner now? Where do we go from here?
The next time I find out anything about his name was one night Jimmy is going to ride around the Bronx with his radio on, and he picks me up, and he's got another friend, Kevin Kay, with him, and I jump in the back seat. And he tells us about how they're getting this rash of rubbish fires, false alarms, and fires out towards City Island, a restaurant.
Now, this is 1970. Sorry, John. This is 1975. I just want to make sure that we're all okay. So this is after you and Comp saw him at the diner. Now, Comp, was that the last time you ever saw him?
Well, then I went to his apartment, but that was the last time I saw or heard from him.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So 75 was the last time you ever saw and heard from him.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So Rince, carry on.
So Jimmy mentions this, and soon after he mentions it, we're driving around, and here comes his car that fits the description, over by Pelham Parkway and around the area of City Island.
Now, what was the description of the car?
It was like a cream-colored, I think, Ford Galaxy.
It was a yellow Ford.
Yellow Ford Galaxy, yeah. So we start following this vehicle, and we saw him set a couple of rubbish fires in garbage cans along Pelham Parkway, and he pulled a couple of fire alarm boxes. We continued to follow him, and I think he realized he was being followed, and he went from driving like at about 10 miles an hour to driving at about 80 miles an hour to try to evade us.
Down Pelham Parkway.
Yeah. And then he ended up jumping on the New England Thruway and got off at Connor Street. And we were able to still follow him, and he backed into a parking lot in a motel. So it's kind of like a stalemate. He's sitting in the car in the parking lot, and he couldn't have seen me in the back seat. So I said, "Listen, you know what? I'm going to get out, walk around the block." And I remember it was a pretty cold night, and I came from the opposite direction and walked through the parking lot, grabbed the plate, and got in the car. And Jimmy ran the plate. And it came back to David Berkowitz. And when he said that, he called the fire department. He ran the plate. That the plate comes back to David Berkowitz. And I think at that time it was registered to Barnes Avenue. And immediately I said, "Oh, David Berkowitz, that's Snedeker and Comparetto's friend."
And Jim, did you know Berkowitz at the time?
Well, other than that meeting I had with John Comp at another diner at another date, where we had lunch, casual meeting over lunch, which I went into detail with. He didn't impress me there, and with his inappropriate laughing. So
Right,
I didn't think too much of him or the incident at that time, But when his name popped up with me and John following him, I knew who. I put two and two together and realized who it was.
Right.
I couldn't put an insight into him because I didn't know him that well. But Rince had met him, and we knew he was a friend of Comparetto's.
So then what happens is you get his name, and you get his name, and and Rince, you say, "Oh, that's that friend of Snedeker and Comparetto's," and then where'd it go from there?
That's what we often say.
Well, Jimmy, you had that incident with the fire marshals, I think.
Yeah, well, I went into that detail with the marshals when I told the marshals what happened, thinking it was I was telling them about bullshit, but they made a big deal about it. They were doing a whole investigation about a rubbish fire that went up the wall of one of the restaurants on City Island, and usually they don't do that, but they were told to look into it. And I told them what I had, and initially they thought it was good information, but I found out later on that they didn't think it was very good information. And
now, did word get back to Berkowitz that you guys were onto him?
Well, of course, it's many years, but I remember I did talk to Comp about it, and he went, and I think I explained in the original video that. I told Comp about it, and Berkowitz, and he told me again, like he told me at the diner after the inappropriate laughing thing, that he had problems in career and all that drugs and everything like that. I said, well, just let him. My goal was to stop the nonsense of the fires and the false alarms, because they, like I said, they were a nuisance. They were annoying,
Right. Well,
so
here's like a little bit of his fire log, which is somewhat interesting, especially when you read that he was getting into Riverdale, Palisades, West 247th, Blackstone, West 237th. Yeah,
you should that other page that you had of this log, the initial one that we looked at. If you could bring that up, we should bring out a very important point about that.
Right here.
Yes. Now, that second line, well, the first two lines, second line, 61st Avenue and 262 Street. Now, that happened in April of 1977. Wasn't there a shooting, a SOS shooting before that, 76?
Yeah, November 76.
And what was the location of it?
That was 263rd and 60, right around there.
Right.
It was the Lomino de Masi.
So he was
in that area.
He was on patrol. Occasionally, he was looking for other activity, and he went to these. He must have pulled these fire alarm boxes. Now, the car fire he could have started. That 21 is a brush fire. That's Marathon Parkway. I don't know where that is in relation to it. But this is a car fire, and this is a false alarm. So he was in that area a year later. So
yeah, and if you look here, East Gun Hill Road in Mace is right around where the Valentina Suriani and the Donna Loria shooting was. Then you have here Bayshore and Bay 13th, which is down in Brooklyn, which is, I think, near where Moskowitz was shot.
Anywhere in Brooklyn South puts him in the ballpark,
So these are very interesting fire logs because it shows him
It shows that the
Well,
shootings and these fires overlapped.
overlap. And right, he was in those areas. And how do we know that he didn't shoot someone a night that he meant out to go out for an arson, or he meant to go out for an arson and shot someone? Because
Well, here's a better question. John, what do you think of him? Maybe he had the gun when we were chasing him on Pelham Parkway. You think so?
I think there's a good chance that he had that gun, or maybe he was armed with maybe something else. I mean, I don't know what the date was. They have him as purchasing that gun in Austin, Texas. I don't know what the date was. We'd have to check that.
yeah, I have that somewhere. It's in the Surlac-Sarasi documents, which I don't have handy right
What do
this
we have
second.
to check?
Surlac-Sarasi.
We got to check the date when he purchased that gun in
I
Austin,
actually
Texas.
hold on. I have that here. Surlac-Sarasi.
I know his friend purchased it for him, and he carried it back to. I think it might have been his army buddy.
I'm getting it here real quick. June 12th, 1976. David Berkowitz.
All right, so that was after.
Right, purchase a 44 caliber.
That would have been after that time when I think when we followed him.
Oh, he didn't have the gun. Okay, right, yeah.
But he could have had a gun.
Yeah, no, he could have had a gun. Yeah.
But you know, this also brings up an interesting point, and maybe you guys can speak to this since you kind of all sort of, I guess, knew him. Maybe you knew this was a personality trait. He loved to drive around.
Well, you know what this reminds me of? It brings a thought that he's bored, he's riding around, he's looking maybe for victims, and this is entertaining him while he's looking for the victims. His mind is racing. He's filling in whatever impulses he has by setting these fires and pulling these fires.
Could very well be.
Right.
You know.
And but to me, it shows this tendency. I've come up with a term that Berkowitz was known to roam.
Yeah.
And I actually think that was part of I'm formulating the thought. It's just the thought. It's just a theory. I'm not saying it's fact or that I know it to be the case, but I can actually see him roaming around one night. Look, right here, we have him in Riverdale, Palisades and 247th Street. That's just 2 miles from Wicker Street. I have him. I can envision him one night in 74, 75, going up and finding Wicker Street, just, you know, and maybe obsessing over it in some way. I mean, it could be. You never know.
Could be, yeah.
I mean, it just seems to make sense given the fact that he loved to drive all over the place. I mean, we have him going in here, Bronx, right? Kings, that's Brooklyn. Here's Queens, right? All over Queens, Bronx, Queens.
Go back to that Bronx thing again. You know, those Palisades in 247, Blackstone 237, Palisades in 231, Douglas 23. Again, that's in those very slow neighborhoods of Riverdale. 52 is up there. They're like the second slowest company in the Bronx.
And they're also very, very off the beaten path, these areas. And
to say that it was a coincidence that these things came in on this, well, this one came in the 15th, but the 20th, the 21st, I don't even think in a 3-day span they would have had that many runs. And what were they? A false alarm, the 9-2, an abandoned vehicle on the Palisades in 231, and Douglas in 237 was an abandoned vehicle. Well,
wait a second. How can you tell that?
A 9-2 signal.
So 9-2 means abandoned vehicle?
Oh, false alarm.
False alarm.
23 is an abandoned vehicle.
What does 18 mean?
First due engine and first due ladder company operated.
Okay.
And 52, in that case, 52 and 52.
Why would he be calling in an abandoned vehicle or writing it down in the log?
We don't know. I don't think he called it in. I think, quite frankly, I think he started it. And then,
it's a fire in an abandoned vehicle. That's what you mean by that. Okay, okay.
He sees an abandoned vehicle. He says, "Oh, let me set this on fire," because he's
that's kind of
riding around. He's lonely, and I think this loneliness, this manifested in his way in some kind of this psychotic behavior.
And also,
he filled in the blanks of his loneliness by pulling these fireboxes, setting these fires, and hunting down people that he was going to shoot. And I think that kind of, to me, fills in some of those puzzle pieces of his behavior.
I think so too. And also, listen, if he's setting abandoned cars on fire, first of all, how do we know they were really abandoned? They could have been.
Going to say that, sometimes these fires get not to bring up another issue, the fire that happened across the street from my house. That car was fully involved at the initial ignition. So by the time the fire department got there, the whole car was on fire. So to make it easy on themselves, they probably made it what we called an ADV, abandoned derelict vehicle.
Right,
You know,
right. But this also shows a tendency to go up to a car and commit a crime, just like in Son of Sam, right?
Right.
Going up to a
Yeah.
car and committing a crime, doing something very violent to a
Yeah.
car, right? Fire is very different from a gun, but still sort of the same mindset there.
It's violence, and that's what he lived off of, I guess.
So all right. So this is very interesting. So then the next time any of you guys ever hear about Berkowitz, it's after his arrest.
For me, it was, yeah.
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 And John?
Same thing.
And
Yeah, me too. I mean, I was down the Jersey Shore, and I was in a 7-Eleven, and a Jersey cop walked into the 7-Eleven and made an announcement. The Son of Sam was just yelled it out. The Son of Sam was just captured in New York. And everyone ran out of the 7-Eleven to go home because that's all people talked about. I'm like, oh, I got to find out who this guy was. And I go back to the house and I put on the TV. And my girlfriend at the time was with me. And I'm waiting and waiting. And then it comes across the bottom of the screen. The man believed to be Son of Sam is 24-year-old Yonkers postal worker, David Berkowitz. And I start screaming, I know that guy. And
There seemed to be a lot of screaming that night.
she tells me, you think you know everybody. And I said, I know him. And I said, it's Comparetto and Connecticut's friend, and me and Fay followed him. And blah, 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 blah. Goes on. The next day, so that night, it must have been 3 or 4 in the morning, Jim.
Possibly.
There's someone banging on my door, and I go open the door. It's Jimmy Fay. He's like, you're not going to believe who they just arrested. So we didn't have cell phones, and there was no phone in that Jersey Shore house at the time. So he drove all the way down to the Jersey Shore to tell me that Berkowitz was arrested as the Son of Sam. But I already had found out.
Right. Wow.
Before that. And then the next day, there was a picture in the New York Post of another friend of ours, Lenny, Connecticut. And I think you might have been in that picture, John, when you were kids.
Oh, which picture in this? Which picture?
What's that?
Which picture?
There was a picture of you guys when you were kids.
No, I wasn't in that. In fact,
I think it was Connecticut, Lenny, I forget who else was in that picture with Berkowitz. And I'm pointing this picture out to my old girlfriend Lorraine, like, that's them. I just told them it was them. Now you believe me. But when Jimmy Fay came down and banged on the door, she found out that was, from him. Now I had some credibility for the story.
Right. But I would imagine that since you guys were all in law enforcement, that this was not something that you wanted to make a big federal case out of or have too many people knowing about, right?
Well, actually, Comparetto was laid off. John didn't get hired, and I was.
I wasn't hired yet.
I was working. I was a detective.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I was working undercover.
Right.
Of course, I had to call the DA and let him know that, a friend of mine just got arrested at Son of Sam. Somebody gave me up to the media because they were all over trying to interview me. And the DA called me up and said, disappear for a week. And I did. I disappeared for a week. I had no interest in getting involved with the media or anything on that.
Right. It could only hurt you.
Yeah.
Well, the media tracked me down that night. Well, the next night, anyway. When I don't think I told Rince this stuff. Maybe Rince knows this stuff. That Bill Pratt was working, and they.
Oh, right.
They called up the Bronx CO, and I don't think they were calling up about information about Berkowitz. They were calling up about something else. And this guy Bill Pratt, another dispatcher, volunteered my home phone and information to the media, telling that I followed them around for a night prior to all this, and I had left the fire department in '77, so this all broke in that sabbatical period there, and so they were all calling me up, all the media, AP, UPI, the Post, and everything like that, so.
But Jim, for some reason, I can just see you actually enjoying yourself talking to all those guys back then. Did you?
Well, not really at 2:00 in the morning. No, well, they catch you off guard. What am I going to tell them? It's not like this where we can sit and talk about it and then go on the air with it.
Right.
And then, of course, they didn't misquote me all that much. They didn't quote me much at all, but they took down the facts of what happened. and ran with that. And then, like I said, the fire department took umbrage to the fact that I was involved in it. And
So I want to bring it forward a couple of years. So Berkowitz pleads guilty. He goes up to Attica. Whoops. What was that? Oh,
that must be a bad
you know,
guy.
my
here we
favorite
go. No matter what I do, I can't get away from these bagpipes.
Hey, Jay, I'm on the air right now. I'll call you back. Okay.
Guy knows everyone. So I
my
want to
son.
take it forward. I want to take it forward a few years. So Berkowitz is up in jail. He's up there. No one's really thinking about this story too much. No one's really aware of what Maury Terry's doing up in Yonkers with all his work and, preparing his book for release in 87. And then all of a sudden in 87 comes out, 1987, The Ultimate Evil comes out. And all of a sudden there's this new story. Berkowitz working with a whole cult. Now, first of all, before that book had come out, had there ever been any inklings between anyone that you knew of, anybody saying anything about Berkowitz having any other help in that?
Yep.
Okay. Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, myself and Jimmy knew this daily news photographer by the name of Alan Aronson.
Yes, we talked about him. Yeah.
Yep. And it was one night during the period of the Son of Sam shootings, we run into Al Aronson in the diner, and he was very animated and saying that I believe that Pat O'Shaughnessy is involved with the shootings.
Now, this is before the arrest.
Before the arrest.
Okay.
And he closely resembled that, right, there you go, that composite. And he said that. And also,
So here's O'Shaughnessy right here.
This is him in the bottom left. Yeah.
Right, bottom left. And then this is the composite from the I forget which shooting, the Moskowitz shooting.
I think that was Moskowitz, correct?
Yeah.
And
does look similar.
Yeah.
It's actually the spitting image almost. The sharp angular nose, the chiseled chin.
Yeah.
Look at the eyebrows.
cheekbones.
So
the eyebrows are exact.
That's true.
It couldn't have been that composite he was talking about, because that came out after the Moskowitz shooting, and he was apprehended shortly after that. Berkowitz was apprehended shortly after that.
When did O'Shaughnessy quit the cops? Before the arrest?
He quit right before I got. Well, no, I was already hired. So he quit in 1979.
When the Queens DA wanted to speak to him.
That's what I believe.
Right.
When they reopened the case a couple of years later.
Yep. They reopened the case, and they wanted to speak to him, and he resigned and said that he owed the Marine Corps time because he had gotten out of the Marine Corps on a hardship discharge before he was a cop, and that they contacted him, which I know that they never do that. Mm-hmm. So that was bullshit.
Right.
And he took off for California, and to my knowledge, he went back.
We don't know where he
went and re-enlisted in the Marine Corps.
John,
I mean, who leaves a police job to go back in the service? I mean,
did you know he went to California? Or only recently we heard that. We didn't know.
No, I heard that back then because
did you?
One of my other friends told me, "Oh, by the way, O'Shaughnessy resigned because I had just gotten on the job not too long before that, and O'Shaughnessy was in the 73 class with another good friend of mine. And the friend of mine called me and says, "Oh, did you hear what happened to O'Shaughnessy?" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Oh, he resigned from the police department and he took off." And he made up this story about he owed the Marine Corps time because he had a hardship. They don't come looking for anybody if they owe them time. I think he must have had to gone and prove that he no longer had the hardship and re-enlisted into the Marine Corps, and they took him back in.
So O'Shaughnessy's. Oh, I'm sorry, John. Comp, were you gonna say something, or Fay?
No. I didn't know where he disappeared to, and only recently did we find that allegedly he's dead. We saw the tombstone, the death certificate, and it appears that he may have gone back into the Marine Corps to disappear. For a couple of years. I believe that's what he may have done, just to get away.
Just mention that Facebook caper again, John, that you had with him.
in a couple of years, well, maybe not him though. That's what you don't know. A couple of years ago, on Facebook, names will pop up, like recommended friends, and Pat O'Shaughnessy popped up, and I looked up his, whatever I could on him, and it said from Bronx, Riverdale, Yonkers, birthday 52, and that was the Pat that I knew. So I sent a private message. I said, "Hey Pat, this is John Comp. Been a long time. Is this you? I said, this is John Comp from 5-2 Auxiliary Rescue, back in the Bronx in Co-op City. Is this you?" And whoever got it blocked me. So I never was able to see it again. Now, based on information we got from the Yonkers cold case detective, he died in 2011, but maybe nobody shut down his Facebook page. I have that a lot. Like today I got something with somebody's birthday. They died 3 years ago, but their Facebook page is still open. So I think, learning that he died, I think that's what happened. But it was in California. It was, in fact, he was in California.
So his was the only name that came up from 77 to 87. It was Patrick O'Shaughnessy's name came up, and actually came up before Berkowitz was arrested.
To my knowledge. But
right.
If I can go back to that story with Aronson.
Yeah.
So Aronson was mentioning this, and it was before the Moskowitz and Violenti shooting. So there was that composite that came out was after that shooting. So he couldn't have been referring to that.
So this composite, right?
Came
Let
out
me just bring it back up.
So he had told us that he was planning to follow him the weekend of that shooting.
Aronson.
Going to tail him, and Aronson ended up getting sick with the flu and was home in bed. And the next thing you know, the shooting takes place out in Brooklyn. And Aronson was sick, and his intention was when we spoke to him, he goes, "Yeah, I'm going to follow this guy on the weekend and see where this thing goes."
I mean, from what we've learned about O'Shaughnessy, he was nutty. He's either calling in false shootings or actually shooting in his apartment and calling it in, leading people on calling in false chases. The guy was obviously, but for Aronson to have that sixth sense is kind of interesting, considering that this name did come up after, the fact, and came up, and it turned out that this guy was in the milieu of these police auxiliary units and was sort of in the milieu where he could have met Berkowitz. Do you see O'Shaughnessy and Berkowitz hanging out? Do you see them committing crime together? Like, that's the thing. How does O'Shaughnessy
I don't know
fit
about
in?
that. I don't know that.
I know of no reason to believe that they ran together. In that respect,
unless there was some other, vehicle where they cross each other's paths. I don't know.
Because you're not talking about going to the bar and having a drink. You're talking about premeditated first-degree murder, conspiring, aiding, and abetting. I mean, these are major felonies, and you have to be trusting someone, know them at least. And I just don't see how O'Shaughnessy fits in. I want him to fit in, believe me, I do, but I just don't know. And so, like, in your professional opinions, the three of you, how does he fit in, if at all?
I thought for a long time that he may have been a suspect. After that conversation with Aronson, it put him on my radar. But I also had involvement with him and saw some of the things that he did that were, I would say, a little unusual, to say the least.
Yeah, sure.
So when I knew him from the 5-2 Auxiliary Rescue, I always liked him. And him and I went to the same high school together. And I thought he was a good guy, He wasn't a bad guy. He was just turned out to prove to me that he was a little bit crazy.
Okay.
So I was in a bar, young guy. So I'm going to say it was 1973. Myself and my other friend, Pat, was sitting in a bar on Webster Avenue in the Bronx, and in walks Pat O'Shaughnessy. And I had known that he and another friend of mine had just got hired by Yonkers PD. And we're sitting in a booth to the right of a long bar. And he sits down at the booth with us, and we're talking, "Hey, Pat, I heard you got on Yonkers PD. Yeah, congratulations, blah, blah." And he's like, yep. He says, during the conversation, he says, "Oh, yeah, they gave us our guns today." I says, "Oh, okay." So he has a denim jacket on, and he opens the jacket, and he's wearing this 4-inch revolver in a shoulder holster under the denim jacket. He says, "Oh, you qualified already?" He goes, "Oh no, they handed us the gun today and said in the box said bring them home and don't carry them." I'm like, "Oh, and you're carrying the gun, Pat?" "Yeah." I go, "Did they give you bullets?" He goes, "No, I stopped in the gun store on the way home and bought bullets." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So my mind's starting to think, okay, you're carrying a gun that they told you not to carry, and you're on probation. This isn't a good idea.
And it's armed too. It's loaded.
And it's loaded, and he's got it on a shoulder holster, and he's sitting across from the bar, and a guy walks in. So the bar was, most of the people were kind of known to each other. So I guess this person who walks in to order a drink sits at the bar, who's unknown to him, arouses his suspicions, and the next thing he has the gun drawn and is under the table pointing it at the bar, at the person that walked in. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, you never know what people are going to do." I'm like, "Well,
Oh
put
my
the gun away. You're
God.
not supposed to have it." He's like, "No." And he stood there, and now I hear this thing go click, and he cocks the gun.
Oh my God.
And myself and Sharky are sitting across from him. And in the meanwhile, I say, "Pat, if the guy does anything, there's at least 10 people you're going to have to shoot to get it built in, and standing between us and the bar." Right? So I'd say after 20 minutes or so, this guy has his beer and he gets up and he leaves. Now he's got the cocked gun in his hand. And he didn't know how to decock it. So he puts the gun on the table and he takes his denim jacket
my
off,
God.
still wearing the shoulder holster, and he rolls this 4-inch revolver up in the denim jacket. He goes, "I'll be right back. I'm going to go in the bathroom and figure out how to decock this thing." And the minute he got up, Sharky and I bolted out of that bar. We wanted no part of it. And that's when I realized, oh, he's really having some problems.
Now, real quick. Now, I'm not a firearms expert. What with a cocked gun like that? Just as a layman, I'm thinking that could go off at any moment. No,
it would take a very minute amount of pressure on that trigger to make
or accidentally dropping it. If he mishandled the gun, it could have went off.
Yeah. So now he's rolling it like this up in the denim jacket.
Right. So
and brings it into the bed. Has to go through a very crowded area between our table and the bar. There had to be 50 people standing there, and make his way into the bathroom. And Sharky and I said, "We're out of here," and we bolted. I said, "So where are we going?" I said, "Let's go to the farthest place we can hang out from here. So we can't find us." And we drove up to another bar called the Lodge up on Jerome Avenue.
That wasn't far enough.
15 minutes after we get there, he comes walking. "Where'd you guys go? I'm looking for you." Like, "Oh God, no!" So that's when I got the red flagged on Pat. It was like, "No, you can't."
So here's a guy who has no problem pulling a gun out, pointing it at people surreptitiously, cocking it, not knowing really how to use it.
In his mind, he believed what he was thinking.
So definitely someone of that we I mean, who am I to clear anybody or not clear anybody? But I think that this guy is obviously still a person of interest, although I just don't see how he fits in exactly.
Right.
That's the whole thing. I mean, now that we're starting to see that Berkowitz was writing these crazy letters in his apartment, targeting the Netto family, possibly as early as 1974. We're seeing that he might have found John Carr's name in the phone book out of all these things. We're finding these North Dakota documents to be very problematic. The story that Maury Terry wrote is unraveling, and with that it's causing me some cognitive dissonance, because it's like, well, how do these people fit in? You remember that meeting we all had at your place? We all were like, "Yo, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, we got to find this guy. This is the guy." And now I'm like, how?
I got a thought on something, and it doesn't really help what we're trying to show here. Now, NYPD, of course, did ballistic tests on every shooting. And that's how they determined that they had a serial killer. And the ballistics matched. If there were two different 44 specials, they would have had different ballistics. So the only possibility would be is if Berkowitz's gun became a community gun.
Right, passing it around.
They lent it out, to the shooter. And if we're trying to put something together, I keep hearing that O'Shaughnessy somehow got involved with Sam Carr.
I never heard that.
I don't know where I saw that.
John Carr or Sam Carr?
Say it again.
The kid John Carr or old man Sam Carr?
I thought I saw somewhere that he had some relationship or some meetings with Carr. And I'm only throwing this out because I thought I saw that. If that's possible, I mean, there could be a tie-in. Well, didn't Wheat Carr work for Yonkers PD?
She did. Yeah, she was a dispatcher.
So I mean, he could have had he could have been involved through her. But again, there was really only one 44 Bulldog used in all these shootings, according to ballistics.
Right. And when they caught Berkowitz, and this is something that haunts Mike Lorenzo, former Yonkers detective, it was wrapped in plastic. So he's like, yo, that shows something. I'm not quite sure what it shows, but he had a gun wrapped in plastic. And he was thinking, well, maybe that's how you keep prints off it. If you're transferring it from one person to another, you just transfer it in plastic. But yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, these are all things. I mean, I'm just reading this right here, and it says that hold on one second. Here, O'Shaughnessy, now Shane is O'Shaughnessy, for his part, would acknowledge his friendship with Wheat Carr and Weiss. Well, where did he acknowledge that? And this is out of the Ultimate Evil, and we've already found that the Maryland wedding is in question. We've already found that Berkowitz didn't really know O'Shaughnessy very well, and how good friends were Weiss and did we touch on this earlier? Weiss and Berkowitz, how close were they?
We don't. I didn't know that they even knew each other.
Right. Yeah. So you're seeing all these things that we're kind of debunking from these passages in the Ultimate Evil. So like, we can't take this seriously either, that O'Shaughnessy would acknowledge his friendship with Wheat Carr. We'd have to speak to Wheat Carr, directly, and hopefully that'll happen one day.
Right. Throughout this whole episode, Maury Terry has a lot of answers to questions that were never asked.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Now, real quick, Rince, you have a Maury Terry story.
Yeah. If you before I get to that, real quick, I was reading some of the comments, and someone questioned my age and saying I look very young, and said I went on 70.
Oh, you're so happy about that.
Tell you, listener, thank you for the compliment, but I'm shortly going to be 70, so I'm older than I look.
You're that old?
Yeah, I'm going to be 70. Correct. So just to clarify that for that
That's
person.
Great.
So yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happened was that Maury hung out in a place called Oliver's. It was a bar in White Plains, and my former wife worked in Oliver's, and got in a conversation with him after he wrote the Ultimate Evil, and she told him, "Oh, that I had an acquaintance, and somehow I knew some of the characters involved in that book, including Berkowitz." So he said he'd love to talk to me. So I went to. I asked her, when is he there? She goes, he's here every night. And he was a pretty heavy hitter with the alcohol. She said he's there till late. He's usually, leaves pretty well in his cups when he leaves. So
now let me ask, this is an aside.
Yeah.
I guess the culture back then was people would just get wasted and then just drive home. Like, well, how he would just get in his car.
That was pretty common. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, go ahead.
So I went there one night and I met him, and we had a good conversation. We were talking, sitting at the bar, and everything was fine. And she asked me at the end, like, "What you think of the book?" I said, "Well, I thought the book was pretty informative."
So he asked you this. He asked you this question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he did. I said, you kind of lost me when you started connecting Berkowitz to the Aldous Perry homicide out in Stanford University. And I said, and with Charles Manson, I thought it was kind of, you connected dots without having any real information. And kind of the way you put it in the book was like, oh, here, I proved it. And he really got pissed off that I said that, and he turned his back on me, and that was the end of the conversation.
Wow.
That's the way the conversation ended. He got really pissed and sat there, turned his back. I said, oh, I guess this conversation's over.
Wow.
So
And
he doesn't
here,
want to hear the truth.
right, and here you are, a person who in 2021 and 2022 are an integral part of filling in all these amazing blanks for us as Son of Sam researchers. And Maury could have had that
Yeah.
that access to that in 88, when you were
I'm
much
going to say it
closer.
was around that. Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
that's probably accurate. Yeah.
You were much closer to the time period.
Yeah.
Berkowitz was talking to him. He could have confirmed all these stories. He could have found out that maybe Weiss and Berkowitz weren't friends, and he could have found out all this stuff from you that we're finding out now. And it's just, I find it very, I don't know, intriguing, interesting, dismaying that he would turn his back on you like
in
that.
the beginning of the conversation, I knew that he was bouncing questions off me to see if I knew the people and the answers.
Mm-hmm.
And at one after one, I knew the people, or I had the right answer for him. So I thought he was doing a pretty good job of vetting me at the
Well, that's why he turned his back on you. You knew too much.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It could very well be.
And I didn't say it in any way of like a degrading or condescending way about the book.
Right.
Said, well, I think you kind of lost it there, and he didn't take kindly to that at all. So
interesting reaction.
I think his ego was really bruised.
He didn't buy you a drink.
He
didn't buy you a drink either.
He might have before that. He was,
now that brings me.
I think I bought him a few.
That brings me to my next question, and we're going to be wrapping it up fairly soon because we're going to get on 2 hours, and I tend to lose it after about an hour and 50 minutes. But I'm very curious, and this was a great episode, and hopefully we'll we can talk forever about this. So hopefully we'll have you guys back soon. But the question that I have is regarding the Ultimate Evil and how it was received culturally by you guys up at the Yonkers Police Department, and then broader to Comparetto down at NYPD and Fay. Like, how was this book received? What did you guys think about it? And how did it influence you to think about what was happening in, you're right in your own neighborhood there in Yonkers?
Well, that Yonkers thing, I'd be very interested to hear from John. How did they deal with it?
I think most people had a similar reaction to this book as I had, with saying, "Wow, you know what? He was coming up with a lot of interesting facts." But kind of when he went off on that thing about, he lost a lot of credibility by trying to connect this thing with Manson and those are the murders out in California. I think people said, well, this is far-fetched, and kind of dismissed a lot of the information. For myself, reading that book and probably having 15 or 20 people who I knew were mentioned in the book, of course, it would really, pique my interest. I knew a lot of these people firsthand whose names came up.
Right.
And it was you don't always sit there and look through the book and see so many people that you actually know personally that are mentioned.
Right.
So I was very interested in it. I had my own theory about that other people may have been involved, particularly Pat O'Shaughnessy. And the biggest red flag was when he left the Yonkers PD.
Right, very suspicious circumstances.
To me, that was it started off with what Al Aronson said. I kind of I respected him. He was really good at what he did.
Right.
But when all of a sudden you resign a job like that to go back in the service, that didn't make any sense, and takes off and nobody ever sees him again.
And intuitively, as I said before, it makes sense that of all the people that Berkowitz could have been involved with, if he was involved with anyone else, it would make sense for him to be involved with a person who was very well versed in law enforcement, evasion, high speed chases, having a scanner in his car and knowing how to use it. And Patrick O'Shaughnessy fits all those. A person like John Carr doesn't. A person like John Carr is sitting there, getting cranked out on meth. Unfortunately, I don't think that he is the most reliable person to aid and abet you in first degree murder. But a person like Pat O'Shaughnessy, you could kind of see that, So I still got to figure out where this guy fits in. I can't quite make that connection, but I'm not a trained detective, so what do I know?
I just got one question for John Comp. During that time, after he was arrested, did the NYPD attempt to contact you at all, except for the 44? No, huh?
No. And I've got to tell you, Manny, you asked a question before. From the time he was arrested, in conversations with friends, with some of the guys here, never, and the fact that he admitted to not all the shootings, he left out 2 or 3 of the shootings. We never believed he was the only shooter. To this day, I'm convinced he was not the only shooter. There's just too many variables. Why would he lie? He had no reason to lie. I know he was crazy, but he had no reason to lie. And
right.
his excuse was valid. And he kept saying, if I give up the other shooters, they'll kill my family. And he never gave up who they were. But to this day, I'm convinced there were other shooters.
Let me just make one point. I've been thinking about this for a while. Everybody says that there are other people involved, and we don't know who they were and where they were and everything like that. It's 40 years or more since all this happened. You would have to say that 3/5 of the New York City Police Department remained silent after all these years. Nobody stepped up and said there was a cover-up. Nobody in the Satan community stepped up and said, somebody who found religion at some point and said, I was a member of that cult, and Berkowitz was a member of it. Nobody ever came forward and said that. Nobody in the media said, we had a guy who said that he knew Berkowitz and we were attempting to locate him and put them all together with them. Nobody ever came across, 40 years later, nobody stepped up and said, there were other people involved, and here's the people that were involved. And as I say, the 3 boroughs that were involved, actually, there was 5 boroughs. It was the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, North and South, 4 boroughs. Nobody in the NYPD came up and said, yeah, I was part of that thing. I was at the shooting. I know what this happened. There was another guy involved. Another guy, we locked up a guy and he admitted to it or something like that. Nobody ever said that. Everything just, everybody just accepted that there were other people involved. After all these years, nobody stepped forward.
Jim, let's remember, the city was in a mass panic for a year. I mean, while Berkowitz was doing the shooting, people were panicking. People wouldn't go out. The city couldn't solve it. The city couldn't end it. When they arrested Berkowitz, and this is what I heard back in 1977, 78, he was part of a cult. The cult had moved out west. The city knew that. And as far as they was concerned, he was the only shooter. They wanted to end. They wanted to end and make believe there was nothing else that ever happened. End everything right there. Anybody who might have been involved probably couldn't speak out, especially if you were active in the police department. And some years later, nobody cared. I mean,
wait, hold on. You saying that the NYPD knew that there was a cult in 77?
If you're based on my talking with other cops,
yeah.
Okay. Because they knew the cult had moved. What I had heard way back was that the cult had moved. They were sending Dave to shoot up the club, shoot it out with the police, and die. And they knew that would be the end of it. The cult had moved, and that the city would be happy. So once this was a closed case, nobody wanted to hear anything about this. And ask young people nowadays, 99% of the people nowadays will say, who's Dave Berkowitz?
The only people who care are watching this show right now.
That's right. It was something that they wanted to die. They wanted it to die out.
That's very interesting. I would like to know more about that. One thing I would like to posit, and again, this is just a thought, and then I want to bring in Eric, who has a question, and then we'll close it on out. By the way, if anybody does want to join in, we're going to take a few calls if anybody wants to ask questions, but we're getting on towards the end of the show, so we'll have to make it very quick. Those of you who were calling in, here's my posit, and I just want your guys' opinion on this. And again, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not saying that it's the truth. I'm not saying that this is coming from 2 tablets from Mount Ararat and that this is the gospel. But what is the possibility that NYPD screwed up and put in shootings into Son of Sam that weren't Son of Sam? Like,
can I comment on that, Manny?
Yeah.
I think that first of all, the NYPD, the task force, did a phenomenal job in this investigation, because they were bombarded with, I think they were getting something like 10,000 leads per day. And there was and they had a lot of detectives, and they did the best job they could possibly do. I think where it came to an end was a political mandate came from Mayor Beam that he just wanted this thing to end. It was an election year.
mm-hmm.
I don't fall. I think they're the best detectives that you're going to find in the earth, and I'm not going to say that they did anything wrong. Or I mean, they were under a tremendous amount of pressure at that time, and everybody wanted this thing to end and this thing to be solved.
No, fair enough. I just wonder if that could account for the different cars, the different descriptions, that maybe some of these shootings weren't.
Anytime that you have an incident like that, you're going to get all different kinds of people. We could put 10 people in a room. We're all going to give a different version of that story. So the information that they were getting in, they were getting flooded with information.
Right.
And no 2 people see something in the same way.
Right.
So I'm not faulting them at all. If anything, it's going to be any blame gets put anywhere with this was that Beam ordered them to stop. And when you're working in a paramilitary organization, there's a chain of command you have to follow.
You mean stop the investigation after the arrest?
They didn't want to hear another thing about it.
Okay.
And
Jim and Comp, do you guys have any opinion of what I posited? Again, that NYPD might not have even gotten all the shootings correct. Like,
no, I think they were right. The police. Let's remember the science. They believe me. If they could have found a way not to blame a serial killer, they would have. Sure. A serial killer is a horrible thing. Just to deal with. The ballistics told the story. I mean, it was the same 44 Bulldog. All the shootings, they recovered rounds. They scientifically, like that, they did a good job. Surely they wouldn't want to add one that wasn't part of it. I mean, there's already pressure to solve this serial killings. They're not going to add something to it. So no, I think they did a good job.
So obviously we have things to think about here, because I take your guys' words very, very seriously. I find that speaking to cops and ex-cops and detectives is really the only way to go, because you get the most sober analysis, free of conspiracy theory. And so I have things that I have to think about for sure, because I've been on this whole trip that Berkowitz, it's looking more and more like he acted alone. It's looking like this cult was non-existent. But from what the conversation we're having here today, there's still some doubts amongst you guys, which I definitely have to take very seriously. Now, I want to just before we end today's show, do you guys have time to take a question from the audience?
Sure.
Okay, now we're going to bring in Eric. You all know him and you all love him. The one, the only.
Hi, Jim, Chief of
John.
Police Comparetto. Nice to meet you, John R.
Hey, Eric.
Everything I wrote that I was going to ask has been blown away by a domino effect that takes us back to zero, Manny. Jim was saying, you were saying that nobody ever came forth and said there was a cover-up, right? And nobody was ever arrested and said, yeah, but I partook in this, Son of Sam. It's not just Berkowitz alone. Then what you just said, Chief of Police Comparetto, has just blown everything open. You've actually given credibility. Manny, did you pick it up? He gives credibility to Chinotti and Rothstein.
With the cult and the cult moving out west, yes.
Yeah, and about even covering everything up, wanting to get this over with, not wanting to go forward.
Yes.
He's actually giving credibility to them, and we're back to square one.
In a
And then-
sense, I don't think that there was a 22 disciples, and I don't think that there was an Untermeyer cult, but
No,
you
but
know,
I'm talking about Chinotti and Rothstein.
okay.
That whole thing of covering up. Remember Rothstein going so far with an investigation and then politics once it stopped. They
Right.
just want the statistics of what's being carried out, but never to get the ultimate, well, play on words, the ultimate evil, the people on top. Beam, Mayor Beam, John R., is no different than the mayor in the Oakland child killer county. It's a trait. Politics shuts it up. They don't want to go forward. The case in Michigan, and they lie. They deliberately lie because they, for whatever reason, are they involved? Are they culpable or what? John R., here's a question. These people know me. I'm not antagonistic. I'm curious. You said that on a cold night you followed Berkowitz and he took off at high speed.
Yeah.
When you ran his license plate and you found out where he lived, did anybody follow up to question him or to say, let's take this guy to the station for questioning?
Well, what you have to realize, Eric, is that we were not police officers at that time. We were civilians.
I was a dispatcher.
We were acting as buffs. We were fire buffs, and
Mm.
Jimmy at that time was a fire dispatcher, and the other guy that worked for the city as dispatchers. But we had no authority to stop him or do anything. And Jimmy did follow this up, and he reported it to the next day, as I believe.
Let Jimmy
to the
tell him what
marshals
happened.
in it.
So you were like auxiliary firemen, not like
We had no authority really to
right.
to really do much. We were interested in what was happening in the Bronx, and we were driving around basically trying to find out who was doing these fires, but we didn't have any authority to really make an arrest or question him or do anything.
Thank you for
From that. Jimmy passed the information on through the proper channels.
Let
And
Jimmy tell him what happened. Jimmy, you made a phone call to the fire marshals.
Well, they came up to the office and they visited the office on a routine visit. And I happened to mention to one of the marshals about the caper me and Rince were on up in City Island and following them that night. So I asked him, do you want to know anything about the rubbish fires on City Island, which is it's not even arson? And the guy was very So they asked me very serious questions about it, and I told them what I had and who it was and what the situation was, and that was it.
also, Eric, in regards to your question, and at that time, this was basically a guy pulling false alarms and lighting trash cans on fire. There wasn't, from we could see, he wasn't lighting buildings on fire. People didn't die. There were, so.
Right. That's one of the things.
Sure.
That's one of the things that I always have to remember is the context,
things.
Right? Even the shooting of Harvey Carr, right? Like everyone goes, well, why didn't they investigate and do all that? It was a dog shooting and no one even knew of Son of Sam.
Yeah.
So you always have to place
in hindsight,
these things.
a lot of this stuff fits together a lot
exactly.
better. But at the time when these things were going on, it was in a totally different light.
So here's a question that I think is a good one. Do any of these cats on screen know Wheat Carr?
I do not.
No.
Well, this
now.
takes me to, oh, I'm sorry.
Now, John. So Rince, real quick though, you were YPD though. What did you ever hear any rumors, any stories about the cars or wheat or what did you hear?
I knew that she had been a dispatcher in the Yonkers Police Department. I don't know if she worked when I was on the job when I came on 79. She already left. She had formerly been married to one of our guys who was very active, really good, sharp cop. That she had been. She was married to one really good fella. And then of course, after the book came out, we knew that the cars were, Son of Sam, and we knew the house, and that this was the target of David Berkowitz's fantasies.
But were there any rumors going around Yonkers? Like, yeah, John Carr was involved. Yeah, Michael and Wheat. Yeah,
not really.
before the book.
Other than the book, I would say no.
Right. And what were the cops? What
paid.
did you ever get any reputation on Wheat from the cops? Like, did they ever talk about her?
I think she was pretty well liked.
So
I
she
mean,
was well
I
liked.
only from my friend that worked in the radio room with her before he came on the job. He never said a bad word about her. I think he
Right.
liked him.
No, I mean that's the word we're getting around town is that she was
Yeah, she seemed
extremely
likable. So,
Yeah, extremely helpful.
yeah.
She couldn't have been more
I never met her, so-
forthcoming.
And
Yeah.
she pushed the investigation. She didn't back off.
Mhm.
Right.
I mean, if her brother was that involved, she would have got wind of it. Something would have. But she was
Oh,
right
yeah,
up there.
She really pushed this thing,
Sure.
and was probably the first person to come out and say, suspect Berkowitz of being the son of Sam. And she, from what I was told after I came on the job, that the two patrol cops, Intervallo and Chamberlain, she convinced them to look further into it, that Berkowitz could be the son of Sam. And they even went out to the son of Sam task force with this information.
Well, she even handled a phone call from the I think he was from Queens Homicide, the justice, the detective.
Right,
She handled
right.
a phone call, and she didn't back off. She said, "All right, listen, I'll give you the information. I'll
Well-
put you in touch with the detective."
Well, the actual story was that another person, Sal, was the dispatcher, and he picked the phone up first with Justice, and Justice
Right.
told them, like, can you send a car over to 35 Pine Street to make a notification? From the Son of Sam task force. Guy got a ticket. We want to see if he might have seen something, might have been a witness. Sure. And Sal starts writing his information down. He says, okay, it's David Berkowitz. He goes, David Berkowitz. He goes, hold on a second. We have a dispatcher here that's been saying that this guy's the son of Sam. And we pick up the phone, and he gave the phone over to Wheat Carr, and the rest is history from there.
The rest is history. It's there's a saying, no good deed goes unpunished, and I can't help but think that Wheat Carr might be the ultimate example of that saying. No good deed goes unpunished.
Well,
Because
You may be right,
yeah,
because she passionately was pushing this thing and saying that Berkowitz was a bad actor.
right. And she's had to live for the past 40 odd years with everybody thinking that she was a trigger puller and a getaway driver.
Well, I think the people were up where that knew the situation in Yonkers never believed that.
Right. So anyway, guys, I think Dave Moth has it down pat here. Need another episode with these guys, Manny. It's a classic. Loads more to be discussed. So I think for the interest of my bladder, my hips, and maybe you guys too out there in the audience, and you guys, of course, John, Jim, Eric, both Johns. We're gonna end it here. So I want to say, of course, thank you so much. This was to you guys here on the panel. This was actually quite historic. This is the first time ever that 3 people from the milieu, the auxiliary units, the law enforcement community, Berkowitz's old friends and acquaintances have ever been in one place at one time telling these old stories publicly, right. And of course, filling in the gaps for you guys out there. And this is definitely was a thought-provoking episode for me. I know that I have to now reassess some of my thinking in lieu of this new information. And but hey, that's the fun of it. So any last words, guys, before I take the audience on out?
I would just like to thank you, Manny, for having us on, and it was a treat to have my 2 very good friends on with me, Jimmy and John, and nice to meet you, Eric.
And nice to meet you, John.
Yeah.
This is really making me rethink so many things. And there's so many questions still to ask that I didn't. But another time, it's over 2 hours.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do
God bless
another
you,
one.
Jim. Stay well.
So,
right, you guys.
Hey, Eric.
John, it's my pleasure. Jim and Comparetto, any last words?
No last words. I enjoyed this, and each time we talk, little things come out and makes us think about something else for sure.
I think we're gonna have to schedule another one of these in a couple of weeks for sure. We'll have
Definitely.
some behind the scenes talks, and we'll do another one of these. Jim, any last words for the audience?
That's about it, really, Manny. Thanks for
All right.
the
Well,
opportunity.
listen, guys, stick around so I can say goodbye off the air. I'm just going to outro for the audience. And as we spoke about, is all about stories within stories. And today was a perfect example of that. I want to thank John R. I want to thank Jim Fay. I want to thank John Comparetto. And I want to thank Eric Galati for calling in and asking some great questions. Woo, this was definitely one for the history books, guys, and I really don't think that I can say much more other than thank you so much for spending the 2 hours with us today. This was amazing. Next Manny Monday, we have Gary McInerney coming on, where we will be discussing Taxi Driver and its relationship or potential relationship to the Son of Sam. And don't forget, this Thursday, Eric Galati and I will be back, where we are going to be acting out Tom and what's her name? Tom and Christine. No, Tom and Darlene. Sorry, I screwed that one up. Come to Yonkers. All right, guys. Well, with that, I want to say thank you so much, and we will see you on Thursday for another episode. Take care, guys. All the best.